right, we're getting close to time. It's exciting. All right, Susan, how's the weather where you are? Is it just as perfect as I often fantasize that it is?
Well, I don't know what you can see over there, but it is sunny and green and from the rain last night and
Yeah.
72 degrees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you bring that energy here with you. It's great.
We were visited by scarlet macaws this morning. There's only, a few hundred in the world, and 3 of them were here at my house.
Wow.
Yeah. It's awesome.
All right. We got about 10 of us so far. This is the third in a series of 6 get-togethers. I hope this one will be substantially more spicy and enlivening for us all. My intention. Looks like Elaine is there and Anna is here, Barbara. Beautiful. Hey, William, how's it going, man?
Actually, very well. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
I can. Thank you. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
And it looks like we're just at the top of the hour. Great to see familiar faces and a few new ones. We're just at 100 people who have signed up for this online learning series, Deep Adaptation in Times of Collapse. I'm Dean Walker, and I have a little organization called livingresilience.net. And I also am a volunteer moderator on Jim Bendel's recently created Deep Adaptation Forum, and specifically in the coaching and counseling subgroup there. If you haven't visited there, please do. You may just find some community, some resources, some conversation that could be both healing and perhaps bonding, and then again possibly informative. I certainly have a number of people who are signed up for this have come from that Deep Adaptation Forum. And while this is not a Jim Bendel endorsed series, there are certainly plenty of mentions of Professor Bendel's work, and particularly his now viral paper on deep adaptation. Today, what I'm hoping to do is clarify a bit further some of the points that I've included, some of the topics that I've included in and between the first 3 sessions. It's been a very exciting time, a very humbling time. I so appreciate each of us here. In my experience, this is a time like no other in human history. This is a conversation, a series of topics that humanity's never had to deal with before. In the name of that, even though I've had quite a bit of experience creating curriculum and doing training and so on, it's remarkable to me how little is really transferable in terms of how to process. How can we, on a very intimate and individual level, process what's going on? And then how can we also come together as things fall apart, as a friend of mine likes to say. I'd like to, I'll punctuate this particular session with a number of, clarifying a number of terms that I've used offhandedly in the other sessions, or I've included them in the in-between session emails. One of them I'd like to start with is why deep adaptation? What is that? What does that have to do with anything? It's a relatively new term, which I believe was coined by Professor Bendel. I don't pretend to be tremendously well-versed on Jim Bendel's definitions and so on, Perhaps you've seen my interview with him or any of the dozens of other interviews with him on YouTube. I would recommend highly check a few out. For me, how it starts, that conversation about deep adaptation doesn't start actually with the human processing and how that shows up in our own lives. It actually starts before that, where I think the brilliance of Professor Bendel's approach to all this starts with his willingness and a tremendous amount of courage, given his academic background and his work to date, has been involved with trying to find a way to have sustainable business and sustainable communities and organizations. And basically, a couple of years ago, he came to the realization that there was none of that to be found. There was a gaping hole in his experience of looking at the field that he was in, which is sustainability leadership. And he realized that there was really no conversation there anymore, meaning what he saw was imminent collapse of social systems that was human caused. So for many of you, I can imagine that'd be like, yeah, Dean, okay, so what? I mean, because that's built into, if you've read his papers and so on, you've heard that. And I'll just tell you, for me, I come back to it almost every day, that there's an immense amount of courage that it takes to point at the collapse, the human-caused collapse of Earth and human systems. That makes the declaration of a stand for climate change mitigation efforts look like small potatoes in comparison. I wrote a book a couple of years ago called The Impossible Conversation, and it was really based on exactly this point, which is it's tough enough for us as human beings, with the built-in structures and capacities that we appear to have, to be able to tolerate the conversation about climate change. We still have some number of deniers, full-on deniers in various countries, especially here in the States. And we have a massive population around the world, especially in the more privileged countries, which this large segment of these populations, myself included, are often willfully ignorant, keeping ourselves at arm's length from what it really means to handle climate change. And it's actually part of what I think I would assert created the name climate change, as if that's the central issue. I think that's a very crafty part of the control of the narrative globally by those who are in power and those with whom activists around the world are wrestling currently to try and find some kind of action, substantive action, after 25 years of inaction, even with remarkably accurate and pointed IPCC reports. So again, about deep adaptation, why it's included in the title of this thing, why I believe it brings us together, is that we can rally around the courage that it takes to just name the truth of our situation. I could speak for quite a while about my deep admiration for Extinction Rebellion. And if you're not familiar with Extinction Rebellion, please dive in. I will include many links to their source materials. At the number one demand that they have in their, I don't know what to call it, the document that represents what they stand for, the first thing that they request or demand or stand for is to tell the truth. And so in my own somewhat awkward way, I've been rallying the pieces, gathering the pieces that I have found useful in my own approach to this level of truth-telling and living within this level of truth-telling and bringing it to our exploration together of what is this work of deep adaptation. And at the core of it is, one piece is that commitment to truth. And today I'm going to introduce, I'll disclose a lot of my own process, and I invite you to look with a similar depth and honest disclosure. You know, for me, it's been, I've been connected from time to time in my life. I've been blessed with being involved with AA programs, Alcoholics Anonymous programs, with various members of my family and friends. And I've put myself through many of those same process, working the steps and so on. I find the many of the things that they cultivate, the aspects that they cultivate, are really appropriate here in this work. But that's for a later series. We can get to that. So, deep adaptation, the courage that it takes to name our disconnection from our primary sources of meaning in life, disconnecting from our deeper selves, disconnecting from each other, disconnecting from the earth, and some would say disconnection from our own soul. This is, perhaps you'll remember from the first couple of emails that I've sent out, this is what I'm asserting is what got us into this place, got us into this predicament that we're facing right now. This work of deep adaptation is, as far as I'm concerned, the work of reconnecting. You remember also, like, just, I believe it was the last email that I sent out included Jim Bendel's 4 R's. Those are resilience and relinquishment, restoration, and reconciliation. We're not going to be spending a whole lot of time on those. I'm hoping that you are kind of following threads when you find them of interest. So, for instance, you can go to many documents on Jim Bendel's own website to get the much more in-depth layout of those 4 R's. I'm asserting, and just from my perspective and body of work, that there's a 5th R that actually is an umbrella in my experience over the other 4, and that is reconnection. Everything that I am offering you here is basically, if it is useful in some way at reconnecting ourselves with our deeper self, with each other, with earth, or with soul, then likely it will be included in some way or another, some list of possible practices that can be taken on, and so on. I'm going to stop here for a moment, and I'm going to just acknowledge that I've launched straight in, lecture style, and I have not taken the time, which in the past couple of meetings, I've asked us to stop and to take a moment to find a coherence between head and heart and in the stillness. I'd like to do that now, but I'm wanting to just draw a contrast. One practice that I have taken on and put in place in as many aspects of my life as I can is to orient myself in a different way. So again, I'm very clear that I've started this out in what could be called a very traditional business as usual style of delivery. Okay, it's starting time. Here's especially the white male who's going to pontificate or deliver material. Everyone else nods and listens or fades out or whatever you do. And I'm pretty clear on the few benefits that there are in that style and the many drawbacks that there are to that style. And I've chosen to deliver that way intentionally to show this kind of contrast right now and just call it on myself, to be able to use myself as an example. So if not the usual business as usual way of delivering material or of meeting, even online, then what? That starts to nudge us toward the very personal dimensions of deep adaptation work. How do we deploy our attention? How do we relate with another person? Where is our attention? Where's the seat of my attention when I'm in business as usual mode? Look for yourself, scan for yourself how you're hearing me, how you're orienting. I notice that my attention is pretty much all focused up in my head. It's as if there were some sort of plane of glass at my neck level that I'm not particularly aware of my body. I haven't been tracking my breath at all. And so by just taking that breath, I've started to lower my attention just by tracking that, just through the tracking of sensation, first and foremost. There's also a conscious movement of that seat of attention that you may have experienced, or you may have at least heard the words of in Philip Shepard's elevator shaft exercise that was sent out in the very first emails. Could I just get a quick show of hands, like if you could just do what I'm doing, if you have listened to what I call the deep clearing meditation, which includes starting with Philip Shepard and his elevator shaft talk, and then into some music. So again, just hands in, and just hold them up so I can just see real quick. There are a few. Great. Would you go ahead and put your hands down? And now if you've done it more, if you've allowed yourself to do that whole exercise, including laying down, and if need be, the blanket, I don't know if you're remembering those instructions. If you have allowed yourself to do that, would you hold up your hand? Okay, thank you. Great. If you've done that more than twice, I say twice, thank you. If you've done it more than twice, please put up your hand. Okay, thank you. And I mean no grading or something here or judging. It's extraordinarily useful to me to know what might have been attractive or something that you're willing to engage with or not. So thank you very much for that. What is present if we shift ourselves from the business as usual head orientation, mental orientation, linear orientation, is other organs of perception. Obviously, our heart is the one that the group called Heart Math has done a tremendous amount of work, research at how vitally important it is as an organ of perception. And I would assert that there are more than that. So I would like to ask for us to just take a few moments and a few deep breaths to both lower our, volitionally lower the seat of our attention as far down as you'll take it, either to your heart or, as Philip Shepard talks about, all the way down into our pelvic bowl. And at the same time, if you would allow yourself, if it's comfortable to do so, if you want to do that with eyes closed, you're welcome. And if your eyes are open, I would suggest allowing yourself to gaze out at the other folks that you might be able to see on your screen. So I'll be quiet for a few moments. This is a few deep breaths to expand your field, especially the field around your heart. and to lower the seat of your attention. All right, and bring yourself back to a soft awareness of what's in front of you and what's inside of you. Thank you for taking this moment to shift together. Another word that I'd like to spend some time on today is one of the skills that is really mandatory in the business as usual global culture that allows us to stay disconnected, allows us to ignore vitally important innate messages from within ourselves that would normally be coming from a healthy connection. If I were connected with my deeper self, if I were connected with the other people around me, if I were connected with Earth. That word is override. I would suggest that we have become masters at overriding. And so what I'm going to do now is just read you a few recent headlines and topics from just the regular mainstream news. And I would like to ask you to keep scanning yourself and to, if you'd like, have a little notepad to just jot them down so you can remind yourself of which ones you have some kind of reaction to or had some kind of reaction to. So what I'm asking you to do is to listen to this list of topics that I'm going to read and recall best you can if you heard it before. It's fairly recent, so you may well have heard it before. And if you had any reaction when you heard it, and if you have any reaction now. So just a few days ago, the UN panel on on diversity, the IPBES, released its first and only report to date, and that the headline for that report was that because of human-caused damage to global environments and habitats, up to 1 million species are predicted to go extinct because of us. So again, just noticing if you heard anything about that report, if perhaps you've read it, if you had any particular reaction when you heard about that report then, or if you have any particular reaction as you hear about it now. I'm going to just read one paragraph from the summary of that report. Nature is declining globally at rates unprecedented in human history, and the rate of species extinctions is accelerating, with grave impacts on people around the world now likely. We are rapidly destroying the very environment we rely on for survival, and if we don't instigate transformative changes, we will not survive. Just a reminder for those who perhaps you know this already, that the UN science bodies, like the IPCC for climate change and the IPBES for species diversity and so on, they're extraordinarily conservative. What you can count on is that their worst nightmare is to be called alarmist. So everything we've been fighting with and ignoring with the IPCC for 25 years, as we discovered last year in their most recent report, the IPCC, they've been extraordinarily conservative. They shifted last year from a 2100 timeline for most of their metrics to 2030. Perhaps you might have heard the headlines about we only have 12 years, which, by the way, now we only have 11 years. These are based on ultra-conservative reports from these scientific bodies. May 29, and by the way, there's been a couple of mentions in the chat about will I include links to these. I'm happy to include links to each of the things that I'm mentioning today in the next in-between email with this recording, so I'll include that. There's a recent May 29 report anticipating the 2021 IPCC report, which is at this point predicting that their estimates up till now have been half as fast. In other words, the bad things that they are keeping track of are going to be happening twice as fast as what they had used to predict the 12-year timeline before. So again, I'll include that link, just something to notice, another piece, another topic to just scan and notice. I know I just said it clumsily, but nonetheless, it has impact. Just make note of your impact. In the past couple of years, we've received a number of reports from different regions around the world that indicate drop in insect populations of between 75 and 90%. So for those of us who might not be so systemic or might be systemically challenged, those base elements, those base participants in the food chain, like insects, for instance, are vitally important. Without them, there's no chance for life as we know it. So just notice that. Notice how that landed for you the first time you heard it and how it lands for you now. Up to 50% of global phytoplankton is gone. And phytoplankton, it's unclear. There's a range of how much of global oxygen it produces, they produce. The range is between 50 and 85% of global oxygen. So it's far above my knowledge base to say anything about that. But even if it's at the low end at 50%, they are 50% less prolific than they were 50 years ago, phytoplankton in the ocean. There's a project called Year Zero, and I'll be sending out a link and a video to this. I may have sent it out in the very first one, but I'll send it out again. And basically it continues a line. And the line is the number of wild animals, especially the larger, more charismatic, visible wild animals on the planet. And they have decreased also in the last 50 years, more than 2/3. There are 2/3 fewer larger wild animals now than there were when a relative old guy, was born. So if you continue to draw that line, and if we were to continue doing what we do in the business as usual systems to have that happen, which there is no sign that any of those things are slowing down, then they will be, the wild animal biomass will hit functionally zero by 2026. So again, please just notice, just scanning, breathing, noticing if something does bring up an upwelling of an emotion, you may want to note that emotion. If you have particular quality of thoughts, please just make a quick note. Last one that I'll bother you with today is all global coral reefs and fisheries are now predicted to be either collapsed or just fully dead by 2048 or sooner. All coral reefs and all global fisheries. So thank you for sitting through that. I'm not a big fan of hitting people over the head. This is not extinction porn. So I apologize if this comes across in that way. What I wanted to offer you was something that I just noticed I had slipped into. I had slipped into my own version of override. You know, mine looks like I'm involved with this every day. I'm writing a new book and I'm doing these programs and I am very up to date with these kind of figures. I noticed that I have my own brand of overriding. I have my own brand of cutting off my feeling body. And why I don't know how many have gotten to read the email that I last sent out. It included some of the bare bones basics of self-regulation. And really that is meant to be the first step of a far deeper self-awareness in this pursuit of deep adaptation. And the very best ways I know to do that are through sensation and through the feeling body. It definitely does not work for me to go with more information, more linear, and more and more and more. So again, my apologies to whatever degree this seemed like that was the point. That was not the point. The point was opportunity after opportunity to notice our own body, our own feeling body. Within a particular shared experience of truth. I'm going to ask real quick to do another hand thing. Quite early on, I sent out a worksheet by a blogger named Paul Chafurka, and it was the 5 stages of awareness. And I'm wondering if you either have not read it or it just didn't ring for you, so you didn't quite identify with it, you could just put up a fist. And if you do recall the number between 1 and 5 where you landed, where, yeah, that seems about where I am, then you could put up that number of fingers. And again, if you just don't remember and just don't quite get it, but you did see it, again, just put up a fist. That means, you know, yeah, you saw it and it didn't quite resonate for you. And otherwise, if you do recall, put up the number of fingers of the stage you put yourself at. Okay, thanks very much. Thank you. one of y'all, Michelle from Santa Fe, she and I were talking just before this started up, and she just made a great point of the number of jaw-dropping issues and elements of our world that are going on that have almost nothing to do with climate change or even collapse of Earth and human systems directly. There's plenty going on without having to look at any of that. You know, if I look at the the fall of the American political system that's going on, and if I look at the long-standing systems that have brought incredible levels of injustice and trauma and inequity, I'm thinking mostly in the United States, but I know it's all over. And I also know that there's a creeping tide of really disturbing politics that are going on that are aggressively antagonistic against any of the issues we're talking about, whether they're environmental or not, whether they're human systems or Earth systems. We're going to be breaking up into breakout groups, and we're going to be sharing a bit about that. What I'd like to ask you to do is to look for your deepest truth at what are the issues, what are the concerns, what are the elements that we're talking about here that are of concern for you. Another way to say it, what breaks your heart? And I'm going to be asking you to disclose that at as personal a level as you're comfortable disclosing. And I would say, if by default you wondered at what level I should be speaking, should I be talking globally or should I be talking personally? My strong recommendation is to allow yourself to disclose as personally as you can, as intimately as you can. And I would like to remind you from the past calls to start each time that it's your turn to share, take a few moments to share, send us 2 or 3 sensations that you're aware of right now, and a feeling that you're aware of somewhere in your system. And I'm happy to just give you a modeling of that right now, so for those who might not have been here before. So I'm noticing my hands are warm and appreciating the coolness of the desk that I'm sitting at. I'm also can feel the weight of my backside against the chair. I also can feel a little tension across my diaphragm. And in terms of feeling, I have a small amount of fear and an upwelling of grief kind of in the background. So it can go that quickly. It really is just meant to be a quick transition through sensation, through feeling, into what you want to be sharing. We're going to break into groups of 3. May I get 2 volunteers to be with me in one group so that we can be recorded, so that people who watch the recording will be able to experience some amount of a group. So if you're willing to be with me, would you put a hand up, and let's take 3 minutes per person. I'll be sending you a 1-minute warning at the end of that. Please have one of you be the timekeeper, and please keep time. So, you know, when the person's done with their 3 minutes, maybe you could give them a 30-second warning, and please make your transitions quickly so that each person has 3 minutes. Okay. Okay. The first question for you and your 2 compadres is, what is currently breaking your heart? Hi there.
Hi, Dean.
Sorry, things didn't quite work out like I thought, but Laura, thank you. And William, would it be all right with you if we were to record this small group session?
I'm fine. Sure.
Thank you very much. So I'm sorry, were one of you going?
No, we were just chatting, just waiting for the.
We're waiting on our 3rd member. He's here.
Okay. Well, would one of you like to begin?
Sure, I can start. So I'm noticing a lot of heaviness on my tops of my shoulders, a lot of constriction across my chest, and a lot of congestion in my lungs. And that's all kind of directly related to what's breaking my heart right now, which is we just had our first bout of wildfire smoke roll through Calgary. And it was, I don't know if you know anything about air quality indices or not, but we were over 400 for almost 18 hours. And day before yesterday, when we woke up, it had rolled in the evening. I woke my son and his girlfriend up for the, we were kind of all getting our day started, and she was very congested from the smoke that had kind of seeped into the house overnight, and she was having a full-on panic attack waking up. And I just felt really kind of powerless to help her. Like, it's shitty. It's really, really a horrible situation. And it wasn't even June at that point. And we've already got air we can't breathe. And this is going to be the new unnormal. And I felt that sense of helplessness around that. Just for me, what it's driving is just wanting to get better at helping people when they're in situations like that, because I just felt really helpless to help her calm. And so I really appreciated, Dean, the piece that you sent out about the self-regulation, because I think that's going to be really essential going forward. And I will try and incorporate that into our lives as we face this. But,
and you have about 30 seconds.
Yeah. I also went for a walk that evening with another friend who was having a very similar panic attack. We went and walked in the trees and just kind of held space for the pain of the world that we were creating.
Yeah. Thanks very much. William, you interested in going?
Yes, I can tell you that my brain hurts. My experience is unlike so many in this particular conversation, almost always seem external. My reactions are always to what's going on around me, hypersensitive to it, I suppose. But that's my biggest sensation is, as you know, I live about an hour away from Virginia Beach. So, of course, we're dealing with that all over the local news and even the national news. Stunning. But what's breaking my heart, what's currently breaking my heart is in the larger context you described earlier, and that's willful ignorance. I just have no patience for whatsoever. People choosing to dismiss what's right in front of them, choosing to dismiss science, facts. I respect when people have beliefs, but I have a great deal of trouble when that falls in the face of the facts. And that, of course, is the purpose of this group, is to deal with the facts. And so increasingly, I find myself trying to be more proactive. I'm sure you're aware that a positive deep adaptation actually had a bifurcation last night. They now have what's called practical adaptation for those who prefer to focus on specific courses of action and the actual building of community. I find that particularly interesting because, of course, that's what Jay Early was focusing on his pre-follow-up, if you will, to what you're doing here. And this group, this split off, it isn't really split off. I think people are going to monitor both, but it's an action-oriented community building, and I found that particularly encouraging. And I might also add that it's made it a lot easier to participate in this group because I'm able to hear everybody in different stages, and that's all perfectly legitimate. But at the same time, I now know that I have a place to go to focus specifically on using my wealth of background with respect to practical things you could do. So I actually feel much better as a consequence of that.
Right on. Are you done?
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you so much. So, Jeremy, I know you were away. Are you back? Can you hear him? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm at work, so.
Yeah. So just so you know, we're in a 3-person groups, and I just kind of installed myself, and we're on the last sharing. So if you would just listen in, the simple prompt is, what's breaking your heart now? So what you could do is perhaps have a little notepad for yourself and just start to notice what is breaking your heart. What are the kind of issues that are breaking your heart? So I'm gonna finish up on our 3rd of 3 rounds. Yeah, it's really difficult for me to hold the scale of what's going on these days. It has gone to such a global scale, and it's so complete. It is so cynical and so complete. It's taking all the skill that I've got to be able to keep my heart open and keep accessing this state that I call grace. Not that I've coined the term by any stretch, but it's just that's how I call it. And it is the only thing that I've got that matches the scale of the predicament at the moment. And so if I didn't have access to that, I would not be alive right now. I'm just really clear that too much of what I love about life is being so disregarded and decimated that I would not be able to hold it if it was left up to the amount of default skills and capacity that I had growing up in the business as usual world. It has taken everything I've had to build out the skills of self-regulation and to be able to get any kind of a loosening of a grip on a business as usual identity that I've had in spades in the past, and to the degree I've been able to separate from it has been life-giving. We have about a minute left. Jeremy, is there anything you would like to share about that prompt of what's breaking your heart?
Well, something that's kind of connected with for years now is just waste, really. Waste in a kind of material, physical sense, and waste in potential kind of worlds that could be, this kind of, it could just be so different, and it doesn't take much. So it just breaks my heart.
And
how,
Jeremy, we have about 30 seconds.
Yeah. So it breaks my heart, just how the gravity, the momentum, the inertia is to draw back into the death cults, into the absolute obliviousness of the oblivion. But then that's why I just hold on to. It's like I saw this film about this guy who goes free climbing, and he just holding on to tiny little nuggets, and that's just enough. A little bit of hope, just little tiny little beautiful things that hold me. I'll hold on to, really.
Yeah. Well, thank you all. We're going to be going back to the main group. Thank you. I believe we have everyone back. I'd like to revisit one piece from a recent in-between sessions email. I know I've been sending a lot of material, and so my apologies to you that I really have not distinguished well what I really, really would like you to see. So I'm going to do that in retrospect now for a moment. If you'll look back into, I believe it was the last email, but no further back than the last two, there was a particular interview that I suggested that you would listen to. It's an episode of the Emerge podcast, and it is with a guest named Joe Brewer. Joe Brewer is one of the leading thought leaders and regenerative designers, regenerative systems designers on the planet. He's just an extraordinary guy. You can get all that you need to be able to find out more about him from that interview. Why I wanted you to listen to him is that he is a perfect exemplar, as far as I'm concerned, as has been Paul Kingsnorth. I've been including every session, every time I've sent something out to you, I've included something about Paul Kingsnorth and the Dark Mountain Project. I consider them kind of a baseline of a very creative way to be engaged with what it means to be a human being in the face of very full knowledge of how daunting our future looks. So Joe Brewer is different in that his thing is not necessarily about being a writer. He is, again, a systems designer, and he has done a tremendous amount of work about answering the question of what's possible if we moved beyond business as usual to something else. What could it look like? And while most of his interviews that I've ever listened to have been about that regenerative design methodology, this interview, he breaks from that pattern, and he talks about, at one point in the middle of the interview, the guy asks him, so what do you say is necessary for a human being who wants to be functional in the face of this daunting future? And he gives two suggestions. One is an enhanced ability to self-regulate. An enhanced ability to self-regulate. That's why I started to include the information in this last email about Elaine Miller-Karras's book and Bob Doppelt's book, short-term and long-term strategies for resourcing and for self-regulation. I think it's a great foundation. The second piece that Joe Brewer talks about in that interview is his way of putting it is a psychological flexibility. To be able to have some amount of spaciousness within our system, within our way of processing the world, within our way of experiencing the world, and that must, so I'm going to add something now, this is me talking, not Joe Brewer. This requires us to establish a baseline in our experience. One of the things that I have mentioned, but I have not put neon lights around it in each of the offerings so far in this series, is a huge cost of our disconnection from deeper self, from others, and from Earth, is that we lose a baseline in our experience. We don't know what we don't know about our own body and our own system. So you may recall from this last email that I sent out, I asked that you do a rather simple exercise of starting to journal and articulate what would an optimal state look like and feel like in your system. How would you map it out? What does it look like, feel like? What does it taste like, and so on, in your body and in your experience when you're in an optimal state? That's a baseline that we lose if what we've spent most of our life doing is overwriting. If what we've done in most of our life is disconnecting from deeper self and those vitally important inner signals. So back to Joe Brewer and the psychological flexibility that he's suggesting, is that I use journaling literally every day to articulate what are the triggers in my experience. When I look out in the world, what makes me angry? Who are the real villains when I look out and I can say, that's a really bad person, I hate what they do, and so on and so on. This is really a basic psychological exercise, and I'm certain that many or most of you have done this kind of work. And I guess what I'm offering is, I too have done this for decades, and I'm finding myself going back and doing it again. Because what we're clearly encountering on the global scale is a pandemic of shadow. Those denied aspects of ourselves, things that we don't want to admit to, we don't want to look at about ourselves and about humanity, those become shadow elements in our world. And they influence and direct our lives from, indeed, within a shadow, elements in the background of both our individual lives and our collective lives. And if I could just point to the American political system and corporatist system as a primary example, easy to point at, that's there. So I ask you to just take in that interview. I think that Joe Brewer is a prime exemplar to add right up to that stack now that includes the many pieces about Paul Kingsnorth and Dark Mountain Project. These are examples of people who have mapped out their inner world in a way that continues to grow their capacities and skills at being present in the face of massive stressors. So, we're going to break out again, and it's going to again be groups of 3. I will just be joining up with a group. So I don't need volunteers this time. Thank you very much. And the question is, I'm going to ask you to self-assess. If you were to choose an aspect of yourself, either the aspects of disconnection in your life, and for conversation sake, I've been calling that disconnections from deeper self, others, earth, and soul. What have been the costs of disconnection or override for you with regard to your relationship with others? What have been the costs of disconnection or override with your relationship with others? Any question about that? Okay, so we'll break up into 4 groups, and I'll be in one of them. And thank you. Oh, and let's do 3 minutes again, 3 minutes each. Hi.
Hi, Dean.
Has anybody started?
No, we just said hello to each other.
Hi, Jackie. Hi, Anna.
Hi.
Hi, Dean.
Would either of you like to begin, or I'm happy to if you don't?
I'm happy to be timekeeper.
Okay, thank you.
I have a stopwatch right here, so it's easy to do.
Okay.
Jackie, do you want to start, or I'm happy to start?
Yeah, me too.
I don't mind starting.
Okay, go, Jackie.
It's a
I'll
good
put my hand
question.
up like this at 30 seconds, all right?
Yes,
Okay, go.
it's a good question. I'm not doing what we did in the first question of thinking about how I'm feeling, because I would like to say something about the cost to me of dissociation, or what's the other word that Dean used, but that's okay, checking out or something. I think of myself now, 67, 66, that I've never really been able to take advantage of the richness of human connection in a free, well, at a deeper level, that I have been too afraid and too shy and too scared, whatever. I'm working, I'm wishing and working on showing up, and that's difficult because my relationships in my family are already formed in a dissociated state. So my goal is to be more like a child and go before the dissociation set in, and try and just really show up with others and go into this next stage of our lives here in whatever state, whatever that looks like for me to be that person who I am. I don't know how much time I have, but the lies of what was happening to the earth has been my biggest living on, in spite of, because I did choose to ignore nature probably about 20 years ago. And so coming back into not ignoring nature is a relief in a way, and that's all. So That's my answer.
Thanks, Jackie. Thank you.
Anna, you want to go?
Sure. I'm feeling a lot of tension in my back, my lower back, and I'm perched right sitting on the edge of my seat, I think, listening so intently, Jackie, to what you were saying. I'm just going to uncross my legs and put my feet on the floor. As I said in the previous breakout, I'm really struggling to stay present this morning. So I'm just going to look at you guys for one little second here. Hi, Dean. Hi, Jackie.
Hi.
Yeah, there's so much sadness underneath, which came out as soon as you asked us, Dean, to move our locus of perception. But then when you did all the news thing, I just couldn't stay there, and I'm just entering back down now.
Yeah.
With the three of us. And so much gratitude that I'm somebody who is able to cry. And for a really long, deep apprenticeship with sorrow in the last decade for me personally. So many gifts. And so the cost, I guess I just like to preface by saying that I guess I feel like in terms of if you took a bell curve of the mainstream of the population, I'm probably not in the middle of that in terms of disconnection, in terms of who I am in my temperament and how I was raised and so forth. Gosh, my time is almost up. But where the costs have been in my life, I would say, is that how I am in terms of my more way that I am in the world, how I always viewed that as being a deficit and something wrong with me. And that has kept me from showing up with all of who I am and my gifts in the wider world. And that has been a huge cost to me personally. And in the spirit of Jem's work, fully embracing the poverty of these times that we're living in is a huge opportunity to, like you said, Jackie, show up and actually spend everything that I am and everything that's left to me in service to these times, and to not bear that cost personally anymore as being indicative of my, indicative of my some personal deficiency. So, thank you. Okay, Dean.
I'm feeling a relaxation and a warmth across most of my shoulders and back area, and a little bit less tension in my diaphragm. And feelings, I feel a warmth and a love that has a feeling of just a deep gratitude and appreciation for being here right now with you two. And I look at the costs of my disconnection and override in relationships. And early on, it meant I was a very typical over intense male, white male on the corporate track. And even with all the right trappings of being a sympathetic person and somehow more enlightened or something, I still know that I caused a tremendous amount of separation and discomfort and really all the way to pain in others and in myself in earlier times and ways. And now I'm so immersed in the mystery and the unknown. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be connected with my own family, my own friends, and my own neighbors in a good way. It's very rare that I just bump into someone and we can start to have a conversation, even after a few getting to know you sessions, to be able to deepen it into what's really of consequence in our world, what really matters.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know if I'll get much of that in many of the circles I'm in my daily life. I'm deeply thankful for this work and being able to be connected with so many people in this way. And so for that, I'm just deeply grateful. And I don't know how I could possibly be doing it more. I'm diving in deep in the direction of reconnection with other people in a significant way. And I feel like I'm finding wonderful resources and other people to connect with. So for that also, I'm very grateful. And I'm actually done. So I'm gonna just click the button for us to be all returning.
Thanks, Dean.
Thanks, Dean.
But
Thanks, Anne.
we don't have to stop. I'm just telling you that I'm distracted for a moment.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
And I've just given the 1 minute signal to everybody. So thank you both. Thank you both. It's precious to me that we can just take these few moments together to have our worlds overlap and connect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I feel found and feel safe.
Mm.
And so I think it was on Dark Mountain, he said how ironic or something it is that people are finding they regain their hope in the middle of this collapse. And I think I'm one of those people.
Okay, Jackie, see you in the big room.
Okay, bye.
Bye. I believe that everyone is now back. Oh, thank you. Laura has put the link to the podcast up in the chat. And so people, if you're unaware of the chat, please look in the bottom of your screen. There's a chat option and you can see what people have been writing in today. And that's also a way you can communicate with one another privately if you wish to during these calls as well. What I'd like to do, there's always so much more that I would love to do in this call, but I would like to just open for some whole group sharing of probably just one or two people, maybe three, I would like to ask of you a sharing of how it is to be with kindred spirits who are also wanting to grow, wanting to transform, wanting to somehow increase our ability and our capacity to be more human with each other and with life in the midst of the most daunting time in human history. And I'm just curious if anyone would like to share something that has welled up for you, emerged for you in this conversation or in your process of doing your own deep adaptation work. You could just unmute yourself and share.
Hi, Michelle from Santa Fe here. So there's something really bittersweet about these calls and, you know, this online work. And I've expressed it in the past that, you know, it's on one hand so beautiful and so grounding, and it feels so safe. And, you know, I'm not alone. We're not alone. And it's also devastating because the computer gets turned off and then, well, I'm alone. But I'm not. I do have community here, and I have people in my life in the flesh who I connect with to an extent. I mean, nothing is like that. You know, this is pretty damn amazing and rare. And I want to know whoever is in my neck of the woods, and nobody from Santa Fe ever shows up. And it's sad, you know, or the Colorado people, whenever, I don't know if there's any Colorado people on this time, you know, I'm always thinking, I got to go to Colorado. I got to find you people. I want the flesh, you know, I don't just want the face and the screen and the words. I want the flesh and this, and that's part of my, you know, grounding, my embodiment, and resilience building. Ooh, it made me cry. So that's the you know, the confusion and conundrum part of this for me, is the conflict. Is sometimes I don't want to do this because it's just the separation is so hard. So I'll stop right there.
Thank you, Michelle.
I'm Victoria, and I just, this is the first time I've done this, and I joined late, and I went right to the breakout group, and it's like a breath of fresh air. It's like a gentle spring breeze. It is, I'm so grateful to be with you guys. This is like being in the same room with people who are speaking the truth and have their eyes wide open, and we're breaking, our hearts are breaking together, and it's absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much, Dean, for hosting this space.
Thank you.
I just wanted to share that I do have the great privilege and joy of having someone on this call that I do have a face-to-face chance to do this work with, and that's Anna Gardner. And we have a eco-grief circle that we hold twice a month, and we get together for the evening and have tea and share and yeah, it's pretty wonderful. So I would highly recommend it if you can find the others living close to you. There's so much joy in that.
Thank you. I'm in the midst of putting that together on a very personal level for myself, but also on a regional level here in Southern Oregon. There are a couple of organizations that quite possibly could host that kind of thing at scale. So I will keep you all posted. It's a remarkable community, and these agencies are amazing. So for those who have that kind of an interest of how to do that on a larger scale in a community, or even just on the creating group level, one more reminder of on June 15th, after this session on June 15th, there will be a time to speak with Jay Early, who's internal family systems practitioner, but far more than that. And he's going to be offering to kind of escort a number of people through the basics of putting together a group that's aimed toward this kind of depth of personal process and so on. Sorry for the break for an advertisement there, but I think it may be very useful, and I'll be sure to put that information in all the emails between now and next session. I think we have time for one more person to share. Is there someone who'd like to step forward?
Hi, everyone. I'll just say that I really want to mirror and reflect back the longing for in-person contact. And I do think that this group that we're in can be a seed for that. One is it's a way to find each other, you know, it's a way to find who is local, and also to get ideas of how we can start something locally. Like the Eco Grief Circle, I love that idea. And I do think that I could see how it could probably dovetail with like the Death Cafe movement, and that which is an already existing structure. And there's a way that we could kind of just piggyback on an already existing group that has already started doing the difficult work of facing death. You know, then you don't have to kind of reinvent the wheel. You can just collaborate with, you know, what already exists. So anyway, I share that desire for local connection and in the flesh contact. And that's part of the devastation of what we've done to our world, is we've destroyed all the ways we connect with each other. So I'm very grateful for this group.
Right. Thank you, Laura. And just a reminder, you can exchange email addresses and phone numbers or whatever you'd like in the chat here. And then you can also connect in whatever way you feel comfortable doing so on the Facebook group called Deep Academy. And so if you have not yet checked that out and that's something of interest, please do. So thank you all for slightly different tone and direction today. I hope it has been useful for you. It was very important for me to have the contrast between the elements that was available today. So I hope that was somehow useful as well. Sorry, I'm gonna just break my concentration here for just a moment, and there's a request. Okay, so there are some number of people that would like to stay and in this meeting space after the official ending time, which is only a couple minutes away. And yes, I'm happy to stay around. So you know who you are, evidently. It's a small group of folks. And then if there are others that just want to stick around and hear more about how to stay in touch and so on, I'm willing to have a separate space for a few extra minutes, so that if you wanted to, you know, stay connected and exchange information or ideas for a few minutes, we can do that. So back to the kind of the momentum, if you will. I don't think I've told you all why I'm doing this. This is really, it was a spur of the moment opportunity to put together this offering in this window of time. And it's one of the main reasons I'm putting it together is to create the first of a number of series, online learning series, on demand learning series that people will be able to do on their own. And they'll also be able to do it together with someone else. They won't have the built-in group that we've got from all these diverse places, but they will be able to go through the material and then connect and go do the whole process with their own friends or family and so on. So what I didn't let you know is that you're guinea pigs. And thank you so much for helping me be a guinea pig with you, to be able to put together what works and what doesn't, what emphasis works and what emphasis doesn't, and so on. Today has been a stellar example of that. And I thank you all so much for your willingness to come in. Victoria, I keep looking at you and remembering that you said, this is my first time here. I came in right into the small group, and I forget what you said, but I'm very happy here. And this is good. And it takes some amount of skill and self-knowledge and willingness and courage to find solace here, to reach out for this kind of space. We're all we're facing a world that I couldn't have imagined. And I can't imagine a more courageous and beautiful group of people to be able to do this with, to do this one, put this one small brick into position of some kind of support for us all as we boldly step into the unknown. Really a pleasure to spend this time with you. Thank you. And again, you're welcome to stick around if you want, and if not, we'll see you next time, and I'll send out recordings soon. Hi.
It's Jeremy, but I don't know, it's kind of just assigned me that name. The computer has assigned me. Jeremy.
Jeremy.
All right. Yeah,
All right, so the other group that wanted their own private space for a little while is tucked away, and they're doing what they're doing. And this is an opportunity to share or reach out or exchange or whatever. And so I'm going to be quiet because I've talked way too much. And I'm open, happy to answer whatever you might want to ask me, but mostly it's a time to share and chat. And
Thank you. Well, I got a chance to know Susan a little bit more today because she was in my breakout group. And I would love to get your email, Susan, and maybe we can have an exchange. And I don't know you, Jeremy. Where are you from?
Well, I'm from, and I live in London, in Britain, where old Donald's coming to say hi. Yeah, so that's why it's great that this is at this time, because I can actually attend relatively easy. But Dean runs the safe circles, but they're like 2 a.m. for me. So I did actually join one when I was on a night shift, but not the same really,
Yeah.
But where are you guys?
California.
I'm in Costa Rica.
Oh, fantastic. Is that near Guy McPherson? I think he lives out there, doesn't he?
No, Guy is back in the States. They moved away from Belize, which is where they were. And now they're on the East Coast on the States, he and Pauline.
So apparently I'm not too far from Joe Brewer.
That's right.
Gotta tell you what a kick I got out of listening to that, where I was not expecting that at all. And the back of my mind is always like, well, what can I do? What can I do? What's Joe gonna do? And he said, well, I moved to Costa Rica.
Yeah.
And we're trying to do similar things here. So that was really nice to hear.
What
At
are
the
you
very least, to visit one another briefly and to compare notes or something, because wow. Yeah.
What are you trying to do there, Susan?
There is a village that's, like I said, is not kind of walking distance. I guess it would take an hour to walk. And they share land and grow food and kind of like work together and they do spiritual practices. They have a restaurant. They're not really thinking of this in terms of collapse like we are, but just because they enjoy it. And it's a permaculture. They teach classes and give permaculture certificates. So we're becoming friends with the people that live over there and are sort of trying to bring them into thinking about, hey, let's think about the future and what could go wrong and how we could work together as a community to help sustain ourselves. So that's kind of the direction. And here there is much more of a sense of cooperation in the community. There's no governing body or city council. It's more like people just, they're on chats and they say, hey, let's have a beach cleanup, or it looks like someone needs to come collect the trash, and everyone kind of works it out together. The school that my daughter goes to here is very much like the one that Joe Brewer described, where they are teaching the kids peace practices, cooperation, sustainability as part of their regular curriculum, so that they'll be more resilient in an uncertain future.
Or whatever future really. It's
Well, that's, yeah.
base knowledge, you know. That's splendid. Is that kind of part of the kind of mostly Spanish speaking or kind of English speaking organization?
The local people speak Spanish. That they call them the Ticos, the native people. But there's at least as many foreigners, mostly Americans, that came for the similar reasons that I did, to escape Trump, to be closer to nature, to live with biodiversity, to have a peaceful lifestyle. So we're all here.
Lovely. Yeah, because that's why I'm helping. Like I set up a community orchard a few years ago in Tottenham's a fairly urban area where the riots were a few years ago in London. I've been living there for like 15 years, and yeah, trying to actually connect with people in, I find, the most challenging aspect of you know, to actually engage with people just on a level of nature, just a level of even the self-interest of growing your own fresh fruit. I struggle to generate community around that. So yeah, but then that's why at school, like school with captive audiences, it's always easier with children unable to leave the premises. So I'm helping get the school garden going there, because it was, when my daughter started, it was been left to dilapidated even like for 2 or 3 years, and that kind of broke my heart. I was just looking at it going, what the? So I've helped get that going, and now trying to create a community of people around growing and connecting with the world through that aspect. So that's something I'm doing in a pragmatic, in a urban setting. So temptation is to. So the problem here, if you go to actually run to the hills here, it's already got the bloody Brexit brigade, all the kind of funny old bunch in the country to an extent, but that's kind of my therapy, is to kind of build community around nature in a more urban setting.
Great. So necessary.
And
I think we have to, at least for me, I mean, some people are maybe more just thinking like it's all going to end, so why try and build anything? But I feel like we need to be part of, well, I'll speak for myself. I want to be part of regeneration, for as good as beneficial as it is, so.
I mentioned this to my group, and I want to get your reaction to it, Dean. And I look at Joe Brewer out on the permaculture ranch, and Paul Kingsworth with his family, and they're growing their own food. And they seem to be like, this is how we're going to make our future. They're not really taking into account if the climate collapses and there's no rain and there's no pollination, and things aren't going to grow. Things are going to be too hot and dry and flooded, and kind of feel like they're almost in their kind of denial of themselves. So tell me where I'm off. I want you to tell me that I'm off.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that you're off. I would just say it's a different frame. It's a different way of looking at what they're doing for me. And I'm not pretending to really be able to speak for them. I don't know. But what I can gather from the many exemplars I've had the privilege of being able to talk with, people who know, they have a clear frontal view of what's going on, and they're creating a life in spite of it. And I don't know how someone could do it better than Paul Kingsnorth or Joe Brewer or a number of other people I could be pointing to. Because in the immortal words of a number of people I hang out with from time to time, and if you excuse my French, we are so fucked. There is, and it keeps intensifying and accelerating how fucked we are. And so I don't know of anyone that has the plan for long-term survival in the face of how bad it could easily get. I don't know if it'll get that bad, and I don't know when the major kind of down steps in quality of life that we may experience. I suspect within my old guy lifetime, I'm going to see a lot of those down steps and a lot of suffering. So for me, it is making the very best that we can, being as present as we can, and bringing forth a presence that reflects a real return to a real reconnection with the web of life, including core. And will they, will we then have the magic formula? No, probably not.
Yeah.
But I'd sure love to hang out and do a little tea party with Paul Kingsnorth's little one. That would be fun. So I'm not trying to be trivializing. I hope that was a response to.
It does.
I just want to say, I also think that those folks, Joe Brewer in particular, is talking about not just, physical actions that you're taking in the world, but a certain kind of psychological and spiritual readiness, like the inner skills. And I heard two really emphasized. One is self-regulation, and the other is the thing you mentioned, Dean, flexibility, like the ability to take multiple perspectives. And the more we can be grounded in those kind of fundamental skills, the more we're going to be able to be of service no matter what happens. Like we're going to be able to deal with crisis, and we might be able to be leaders. Like if we can just even be half an inch ahead of somebody else in our own self-regulation skills, then we might be able to offer something to someone else. So I see that that's also what we're doing, is we're developing those skills to be in readiness.
Right. And that gives us meaning and purpose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you say, well, what's the meaning and purpose when there's basically no future? You look at that orientation, there's a lot of meaning and purpose.
Exactly.
Yeah. Like to be hospice workers.
Right.
Exactly. Exactly that.
Does everyone know about Peter Russell, the blind spot?
I remember seeing a video, but I don't recall much.
Does anyone else come across that? Oh, because with that, after, it was actually Caroline Baker kind of put in touch there, and basically he's kind of saying that any kind of technologically aware organism will just basically self-destruct because of every tool creates an exponential number of new tools, and then things speed up exponentially, the rate of change. And so everything will, it's going to come to an end. It has to come to an end. There's no, we are coming to it. I was kind of saying, I think it was you, Susan. It was just in our group, breakout group. Yeah, I was saying I felt, just connect with just the simple thing of birds singing, just really help just to connect with the here and now, and the how simple it is. Just sing, eat, be, however they live their lives. But then there will be a day where there will be no birds, there will be no song, there will be no, where maybe humans will have the privilege of being the last life forms to witness the desolation. Maybe that's the gift. And that's the dread, this dread, of being with my children, with, just like, my good God, that there is, this is the predicament. There is no way out. There is no way out. We kind of, it's like, it's like falling, the moment you're falling off a high place, a cliff or whatever, that's it. When you're falling, there is no, you can experience the fall, and at the end there will be no more experience. That's just something that came to mind there.
Thank you.
Yeah. I need to let you know that the other group has actually finished up what they were doing quite a while ago. And I need to be able to move on to get my recordings going with this particular session. I actually love this. This is like stolen moments. This is like being able to just be conversational instead of trying to squeeze a bunch into a tiny time. So thank you all for sticking around, and maybe we can do more of this next time is Jay Early, so he's going to take this time. Thank you all very much. And have you exchanged what you needed to exchange to stay in contact and so on? Great. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Lovely. Thanks again. Lovely to meet you all.
Bye.
Bye.
We'll talk, Laura.
Yes, sounds good. Bye.
Bye.